Hello, welcome back to the podcast. Oh my gosh, it's my first time podcasting since I gave birth to baby Ben on February 27th, 2022, and it's currently March 30th, 2022. So I gave myself a month to just navigate the transition. Oh, holy moly, what a transition it is, which I will share in this podcast episode of, the raw emotions of the transition, the highs, the lows, and all of that. But more specifically in this episode, I'm really excited to share with you my birth story for a bunch of different reasons. I mean, anything that's like challenging in life, that's like maybe one of the hardest things I've ever done. I love sharing with you guys because it can be so inspiring and serve as a reminder to all of you that hard things can be done. We can do hard things. We can do things that we feel are impossible because, oh my gosh, when I was giving birth, there were moments where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to keep going, how I'm going to make this happen. And it's always so fascinating whenever you're going through something harder in life and you get through it, you move through it, and you end up being on the other side. It fascinates me that we think in our minds like, oh, no, I don't think I could do this. I can't. And then we end up moving through it and doing it. And then you end up looking back in retrospecting like, oh my gosh, like I thought I couldn't do it, but I did it. And I'm much stronger than I thought I was. And the way I see it is like any challenge in life, anything that you're doing either by choice or maybe circumstances in your life have shifted to become more challenging. Anytime we overcome that, I see it as like this extra layer of like grit that we add on to ourselves, this extra layer of strength. And what I always love to do is keep building this like building of layers basically within myself, within my soul in life to just become stronger and stronger and more resilient. Because what I find happens is that when you can overcome something so hard that you thought you couldn't get through, other things in life can actually become easier moving forward. And I just love that feeling of thinking in my head, like, well, I did that, so this should be a piece of cake. And if I did that, I can do this. And I always love hearing stories of challenges in other people's lives because they really do inspire me of how much we can actually accomplish in our lives as well. So I wanted to share it with you as well. And on top of that, I took a course called Pain Free Birth when I was pregnant. It's by Karen Welton, and one of my amazing Shine and Thrive listeners actually sent it to me and was like, "Hey, I think you'll love her, like Karen, and exactly what she teaches. She's incredible." And it's so funny because like weeks before that, I put out into the universe that I want to learn in some way to like have a natural birth. And I was trying to figure out, I'm like, do I learn about hypnobirthing? I don't know, like, what should I learn? And I didn't actively start researching, but I just kind of like put it out there. I'm like, yeah, I want to start learning about that, but I just don't know where yet. And then lo and behold, she messages me and says, here, you should check her out. And then I clicked on her profile. And then I went into her website and I read the description of the course, and it was like everything that I needed. My body was screaming at me. It's like, yes, this is exactly what you were looking for. And so yet again, the universe delivered exactly what I needed. And oh my gosh, this course, I could not have imagined giving birth without it. I learned so much on how our bodies are naturally designed to give birth. I learned about the science behind it, about our mindset, about our emotions, like our physical, like what happens in our bodies for our bodies to give birth. Like it's just incredible. And so basically today in today's episode, I'm sharing my birth story with you. And also at the same time, I have Karen Welton, who is the creator of this course that I took on the podcast as well. And she's hearing my story for the first time as well. And throughout the story, we're pausing, and has a lot of like amazing teaching points on how to have a more blissful birth, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be hard and painful, right? It is hard, but you can bring the notches down of how hard it can feel on your body. So she dives into all of that. And with my birth story, there's funny moments that I share about what happened. There's hard moments that I share. There's vulnerable moments that I share. And you know me, I'm an open book because I never want you to feel that something is not normal and maybe something you experienced, or that like the last thing I want to do is share my highlight reel just with you, because like that doesn't do good for anybody, right? Because every single human goes through like harder moments and, you know, emotional moments and more blissful moments. And I want to share it with you all, because that is exactly what life is. And that is what all of us humans go through. So, oh my gosh, I am so excited for this episode. It's a bit longer because I wanted to make sure not to feel rushed. I wanted to make sure to share the story exactly as it happened with you, with all the juicy details. And I also wanted you to learn a lot from Karen, because she is on a freaking incredible mission in this world with her teaching people how to give, how to empower, or sorry, teaching women how, I can't even speak because, hello, I'm a month into being a mom and Ben is sleeping downstairs right now and Rory's hanging out with him as I do this. And I'm just like, what was I going to say? But basically, she helps empower women to have the births that they want in a sense, and like less painful, less stressful, more intuitive, more in tune with their body, being able to go inward and trust their bodies and senses of what they need in the moment. And she teaches women how to have more natural births if that's what they want. And she teaches all the science behind it. It's just incredible. Anyway, I want to stop talking because I can't explain everything that she teaches as well as she does. And actually, with that said, I'm just going to go straight into reading her intro to you so that you can get a really good sense of exactly what I'm freaking trying to say here. All right, so here I go. So today I'm joined by my guest, Karen Welton, who is passionate about helping other women overcome fear and pain and discover how powerful they really are. As a doula and childbirth educator, she has supported hundreds of women in their birth journey, and her e-courses, which are called Pain-Free Birth and Postpartum Bliss, teach women how to partner with their body's divine design to have a pain-free, ecstatic, and postpartum experience. In the past year, she has grown her following of 100,000 women from around the world, and her goal is to change the global culture of birth so that women no longer fear birth, but instead look forward to it with joy. So, with no further ado, I cannot wait for you to hear all the juicy details. Enjoy tuning in. Okay, Karen, welcome to the podcast. I am so freaking excited to have you here. Like I mentioned when we were just chatting right before we started recording, it's just so surreal to actually connect with you live and in person, because I dove into your course and I just was binge watching it and learning from you and just taking everything you've taught and put it into action. And it just helped me so much. I literally couldn't have done it without you. And it's just so incredible how I was able to have your support virtually. The world we live in right now is so incredible that I could just have your support. You're all the way in like South Carolina, and you just were such a pivotal part to my experience. So I am so excited to have you here and for everybody to learn from you. Yeah. And also tell us how you're doing today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm really honored. It's like an honor that I get to support women and influence women all over the world having their babies. And to me, that's like the greatest privilege I could get. And that's why I created my e-course, because I thought I can only serve so many, a handful of women one-on-one in person as a doula or an educator. But doing what I've been able to do the last few years in creating this course and helping women understand the physiology of their bodies and how their bodies are divinely created for childbirth. It is such an honor to have to in a sense be virtually invited into that space, that birthing space for having an impact. So thank you so much for saying that, and it's an honor to be here.
Yeah, of course. And you're also a photographer as well, right?
Yes. Yeah, I don't do it actively, but
Yeah.
I started off as a photographer and then got into birth photography and doula work and then childbirth education.
That's so incredible. So my whole audience is photographers. So this is like a
Oh,
photography podcast. So pretty much what I love to do on the podcast, it's mainly all about like photography and business, but it's also a lot about personal development. And I mean, what kind of an incredible personal development moment is giving birth? It's like a journey. Like in the course you mentioned the amount of transformation. It's like one of the biggest growth moments you can experience, and no matter how you give birth as well. So I find it really cool that you start off as a photographer as well, because yeah, it's just like you're part of our community. It's kind of cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I actually went to school for art, like fine arts. And so for me to like pivot and go into childbirth education was really, it wasn't a passion I discovered until having my own kids. But art is always like been in my background. And I think it comes across more, my creativity outlet is like in the social media and filming reels and some of the graphics. So I love to do that. And I still once in a while whip my camera out, but it's been a few years since I've really taken up my DSLR.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, so I know you're probably itching to hear the story, and I cannot wait to share it with you and everybody. So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to share my birth story. So this is Karen hearing it for the first time. And then right after, we're just going to dive into chatting about different parts of the birth, of what techniques helped me and why. And we're just going to go with the flow and chat all about it. So,
And you took
so
the pain-free birth childbirth education course, but this is our first time meeting.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay. So it all started on a cold February day. So pretty much, oh, also, first thing I want to say is actually, because in the course you even mentioned, oh, like I want you to visualize and manifest the type of birth that you want, right? And I'm already like a huge manifester, like a very specific manifester. So that was something I was going to do anyway, but you gave me that reminder. And so I want to start the story off by saying what my manifestation was, like what I was like, this is what I want. And then
Love
you
it.
guys will find
Love
out
it.
through the story if it happened. So what I wanted was an evening or a night birth at home, and I wanted it to be 4 to 8 hours long. And I know that's like rare for first time births, right? But I'm like, no, it's manifestation. I can have what I want. So I,
That's
I
a good
wanted,
one.
yeah, I'm like, let's make this a little shorter than like my best friend who had a 15-hour at home labor. I'm like, nope, I don't want that. And then I wanted the baby to be about 7 pounds so that, my vajayjay can, still not have to go through too much if it's a bigger baby. I wanted to have no tearing down there. And I also wanted the baby to come early, a little bit early. So the due date was March 3rd, 2022. And I wanted him to come early, about a week or two. And I was like, I'd be fine with that, because then my wedding season starts in May. And I just wanted to have more time to like, recoup, rest up, re-strengthen myself. So that is what I put out there. That is what I wanted. So to start off the story, it was a Saturday, and I have been like kind of more lazy with my walks in my 8th month. I was just like, it's cold outside. The pressure with the baby on my like bladder is just so uncomfortable. So I was kind of like not walking as much in the last month. And then it was the weekend, and Rory was like, let's just get out there today. I'm like, you know what? Okay, let's go for a walk. And we went for a walk, and I just felt good that day. And I just kept walking. We had a really long walk, like an hour and a half. And then I was joking around being like, this is probably going to induce me. And then we went to go do a whole bunch of errands that day for about 5 hours. So it was a lot of like walking in and out of the car. And we came home, relaxed for the evening, and went to bed at like 12:30 a.m. We had like a late night. And I just remember falling, like it was very rare for us to cuddle anymore with my tummy and with how like I needed a specific angle to be comfortable in bed. But I just like I'm like, oh, I just feel like cuddling you. And I like my head fell asleep on his shoulder. And I swear like 15 minutes went by or something. And I kind of like woke up. I'm like, oh, that cuddle is so nice. And then I had this weird feeling, like a more painful feeling down there. And I was like, huh? And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go to the bathroom, pee. And I go to the bathroom, and it's like, ooh, I have to like breathe through this. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So I'm sitting on the toilet for like 20 minutes, like peeing a little bit here and there, and then just like breathing through something a little bit more. And when I'm like sitting on it for longer and the 20-minute point hit, I was like, okay, Google, how to know if it's real labor or like fake labor, right? And everything that it said was like, sorry, there was a chart. There were two, and everything that said like a labor is happening, it was like, yes, 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 yes. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to wait another 10 minutes before I wake up Rory, because I know you had mentioned, you're like, it's good to just like let your partner sleep until it's like the real thing. In case it is, they have more rest. I'm like, okay, I'm
Yeah,
just
or
going to
until you
wait.
need their support.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this feeling was coming up for me every like 3-4 minutes.
Wow.
And I was noticing that by
And
the
what time was this when
so this
you
was
said,
like 1 a.m. when I
okay.
first went on the toilet. And then like about 1:30 was when I was like, oh my gosh, like I actually have to like focus and breathe through it now. And it went by so quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I'm actually going to wake up Rory because this is very different. And I think this is actually happening. So I wake him up and he's kind of like in a daze. And he also, he watched a lot of the course with me. So he also knows about like early labor and, you could be in it for a day or like a couple hours or whatever. So he wasn't like too worried and he's just kind of like in a daze. I'm like, no, 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 I think something's actually happening. I need you to start actually like getting the house ready. I'm going to call my midwives right now. And so we call the midwives and my midwife is like, same kind of reaction. She's like, oh, okay, it's probably like early labor. Just have him time your contractions. And then if you really want me to come, I'll come. But like I think you're still good. And at that moment, it seemed like it was like every like 3 to 4 minutes. And I'm like, okay, we'll do that. But when I was on the phone with her, I literally had to even pause and be like, I can't talk to you right now. I have to breathe through this contraction.
Yeah, that's a
um,
sign.
it's like it's a big sign, right? And so, yeah, she's like, if you need me, call me. But for now, just have him time your contractions. So we hung up the phone and I'm like, I need you to start getting the house ready because we had like a plan to have the mattress, me give birth on a mattress downstairs by the fireplace, like cozy vibes. And I'm like, oh, also you have to like read the partner birth cheat sheet that I got from your course. I'm like, here, you have to know everything because I was already starting to like not be able to focus. I had to focus on my breathing. That I was like,
Yeah.
make sure to get everything ready. And I'm a control freak. So I was
Yeah.
kind of stressing myself out to make sure everything was ready too.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't expect this feeling to be this painful with such short breaks so quickly. And he's like, okay, whenever you feel the start of the contraction, say go. And then when you're done, say go. And he was just running around the house, getting stuff ready. And I was saying, go, 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 go. And then he's like, Sarah, they're like 2 minutes apart. And I'm like, I know, I knew it. Because what I was doing actually in that moment was I was breathing in a way that I learned from your course, where you breathe in really deep and slow for an 8 count. And then when you breathe out, you inflate your belly like a balloon. And then when you're breathing out, you're imagining that you're expanding your uterus and you're breathing out and you're imagining that the uterus is starting to push the baby down. So I was doing that technique because I was like, if I just expand my uterus even more, stretch it out more, and then it'll be stronger to push the baby down sooner. So I was constantly, every single contraction, I was imagining the uterus getting stronger and then pushing the baby down. So
Yeah, like getting stronger in the top, in the
yeah,
fundus, because it pulls up throughout most of, just like for your listeners who might be like, what is she talking about?
yes,
Like most of labor, like the purpose of a contraction is not to dilate you. That's actually a secondary result. But we always think in terms of 10 centimeters dilation. What the uterus is actually doing is building strength in the fundus being the upper portion of the uterus. So with every contraction, with every surge, as some people would call it, the uterus is using its muscles. It's a bag of muscles and it's pulling upwards. So those muscles, the cervix is like this really thick, dense, like ball almost, or like thick, dense layers of muscles at the bottom of the uterus. And what happens throughout all of early and active labor, it's all those contractions have a purpose, and that's to thin the cervix. So it's taking a thick, layer of muscle that holds the job of that cervix and pelvic floor and all of that. The lower uterine segment is to hold that baby inside you for 9 months. It's supposed to be strong enough to keep your baby safe, but in labor, it's slowly thinning out. And all the density of those muscle fibers are being pulled into the upper portion of the uterus, which is called the fundus. And then what happens once you're fully dilated and that baby can now pass through is that upper uterine segment or fundus has now gathered all its strength. So that's now the thicker part. And what that does is it changes direction and starts pushing the baby down. So the purpose of a contraction is not just to dilate you, it's to build strength, which is what Sarah's talking about, to build strength in the fundus. And that becomes the engine of your labor. So it's your uterus that actually pushes the baby out, not you holding your breath and pushing with all your might, not your pelvic floor muscles like you have to poop. Those are all incorrect. And the way they teach it in the hospital is usually incorrect. So what we want to do is allow our uterus to push, which is what it's been doing the whole labor, to gather strength, to be the engine that basically shoots the baby out like a piston. And when it's ready,
Yeah.
so you don't have to add anything to it. Our job is to get out of the way. The job of the pelvic floor is to relax and get out of the way. So everything we teach in the course is about mindset and surrender and allowing, partnering with your body, which is already designed to do this whole process perfectly. So I loved how you were partnering with your body and imagining, which is like manifesting, like what your body's actually doing. You're partnering with your body in that visualization, which is so powerful because the body follows that. If you're imagining yourself opening and building strength, that's exactly what it does.
Oh my gosh. And that is this exact explanation that you just gave is what popped into my head. Like, when like, it's so funny because when I was taking your course, I'm like, oh my gosh, I always want to remember everything she mentions. I'm like, I'm going to have like a cheat sheet printed out for myself so I can like take a look during labor if I have to. But it was so much going on that I couldn't even like think of, I didn't even remember the cheat sheet. Right. But what I know is like everything that I remember that I absorbed that I needed in the moment came to me and I remembered it. And so what you just explained is exactly what came to me through those contractions. I'm like, okay, Sarah, you wanted like a faster labor and you wanted to not to be as painful because if I'm not breathing through these properly, the contractions are much more painful than if I just relax and accept them and breathe through them. And so I love how you just described that because it gave me also a visual of like the fondness, gaining enough strength to push the baby down. And so in that moment, I basically had you in my mind being like, do this. And I'm like, okay. And it was working so well. And that's when I was like, I think my midwife is wrong. I think she needs to come now actually, because this is just like too fast, right? The 2 minutes in between. So we call her and we tell her, she's like, okay, I'm going to come over. And in the meantime, I was like, it was so interesting because as Rory was trying to get the house ready, I was in my control freak self, making sure, like micromanaging, making sure everything was prepared. But that was making the contractions much more painful because I wasn't in a comfortable, relaxed state. And I'm like, okay, Sarah, enough, like just go lie down. Like everything, he's going to have everything taken care of. You need to just focus on getting your body relaxed. So I climbed into bed upstairs while he got the birth spot downstairs ready. And I just like plopped myself into bed and I focused on that breathing where it was like that 8 count in. And then also I did the deep, like, ooh, like, oh sounds. Cause you were mentioning that is what helps the body like relax and open up and all of that. So I was trying, wait, what happened next? Oh yeah. So, then, oh yeah, actually before I have a little funny tidbit because before I actually did that and climbed into bed, this was the moment where I'm like, okay, I need to go relax and go into bed because I was standing in our bathroom, leaning on our counter in the bathroom, going through a contraction. And we had just renovated our bathroom and we have like a new floating counter. So it's not standing, it's floating, right? And Rory's there like holding my back and being like, are you okay? And then I was like leaning really hard on the counter and he's like, Sarah, like don't lean all your weight on it because what if it like breaks or something? And in that moment, when you're going through a contraction, the last thing you want to hear is don't do this or like, right? It's like you have to just have that quiet moment to focus. And then also in the moment, I'm like, what do you mean all my weight? And I'm feeling so pregnant and big. And I was just like, and what happened was like in that moment, I took both my fists and I like pounded on the counter. I'm like, don't say that to me. And I like pounded them. And he's like, whoa, is this how the birth's gonna go? And then I had to like get through the contraction. And then I calmed down and I'm like, I'm sorry, because we're very, our communication is so important to us and we don't like talk rudely to each other, right? Because it's just like not what we think is part of a healthy relationship. So as soon as I was like, okay, that contraction's over, I'm like, babe, I'm sorry I reacted that way, but like just read the cheat sheet downstairs. Just it'll tell you what to say when I'm going through a contraction. And he's like, okay. But I had like I felt like the Hulk, the Incredible Hulk. I was like, smash, like Hulk smash. And he got so scared. He's like, is this how the whole birth is gonna go? Oh my gosh.
You wouldn't be the first woman to like curse out her husband in the middle of a contraction for saying something at the wrong time.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. So
I've had so many clients who are like, after labor, they're like, I am so sorry to their partner or even the nurse if they were like, because you just don't have the capacity to like frame your words nicely. Like, if you're in the middle of a contraction, you just have very few brain cells to work with. And you're like, yes, no, stop it, go away. Don't touch me. Shut up.
Oh my God. Now I understand that because I've heard it before, but now I actually have understanding of that. It's so funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So fast forward, I'm relaxing in the bed, finally going through contractions. My midwife comes and she's like, okay, let me just check you. Let me see how dilated you are. And so I was 4 centimeters dilated. And this was probably 2 a.m. or 2:30 a.m. So it was an hour and a half or an hour to an hour and a half in. So she's like, oh, wow, you're already 4 centimeters dilated. Okay. So she's like, okay, good thing I'm here. And then so Rory and I have a dog, Abby, and she can get really like protective over me. So we were like, okay, part of the plan is as soon as I'm in labor, we're going to call my parents to come pick her up. So she's not like, why is my mom screaming? Is she okay? And she would be like overprotective right beside me. So my parents came over to pick up Abby. But then Rory's like, do you want to see your parents for a second before they go? I'm like, yeah, okay. And they came upstairs and my mom sat down beside me and she put her hand on me. And every time I had a contraction, she would breathe through it with me. And I'm like, oh, this is actually so nice because like, she's been through this before and it's just so comforting to have a woman that has been through it before and know what I need right now. And I just need someone to breathe through it with me. So actually was like, oh, actually, maybe you can stay for a bit. Cause Abby was just downstairs sleeping. So everything was fine. I'm like, maybe until Abby wakes up, just stay with me. This is so relaxing. And what ended up happening is my parents actually stayed downstairs the whole birth until the baby came, which is really special and totally unexpected. And it was very spontaneous because our dog was totally fine just sleeping downstairs, which totally shocked us. But yeah, so she helped me through that. And then the funny thing is that because we planned to so yeah, she helped me through that in the beginning a little bit. And then it was so weird because out of nowhere, I'm like, okay, I don't need you anymore. I want Rory. And it was like very specific things, right? So it's like, Mom, can you go downstairs now? I just need my space, but I want Rory to be by my side. And then it was so funny because I was planning on giving birth downstairs on this mattress by the fireplace, everything. And then I was upstairs in the bed so comfortable, and going downstairs and rechanging the whole situation felt like the biggest mission because I had my contractions coming so often that I'm like, I don't want to have a contraction in the middle of the hallway and then on the stairs and then down in the kitchen. And then again, while I'm trying to reposition, that's like a whole 20 minutes of painful contractions. I'm like, no. So I was like, I'm giving birth.
That's a good sign you're like in active labor when the thought of moving is like terrifying. When you're like, no, I can't possibly walk like 5 feet, let alone like all the way down the stairs, especially like if women are pushing and you say, okay, we should try another position change, which I'll suggest a lot to my clients. And there's like a mental block. There's like, no, I cannot, like the baby's head is so low and the intensity and the feeling is so intense that you're like, I can't move. A lot of it's mental because sometimes that position change really helps. But I just think that's a great like signpost of like, okay, you're in active labor or at least really close to it. If you're like, no, I can't. Because early labor, you're like talking, you're moving, you're kind of like able to go on about your day like normal. Sounds like you kind of like jumped right toward active labor or skipped most of early labor.
Yeah, that's what was so shocking to all of us. It just what started right away. I was like, what?
You manifested it.
Yeah, I did. I did. And the whole time I was like, yes, this is good. This is what I want, because that means that it'll happen sooner. Like the baby will be out sooner. So I stayed upstairs in the bedroom, and because the midwives needed flat surfaces, I was like, I'm staying upstairs in the bedroom. That's where I want to give birth. And we had access to our ensuite, which had a bathtub just in case. So I'm like, if I want to go in the bath, it's right there. I don't have to like go up and down the stairs, because there's no way I can do that. Right. So it's so funny because the midwives needed the flat surfaces, and we had that all prepared downstairs in the kitchen. And then it's like everyone's like, okay, Sarah decided to change everything and give birth upstairs. So they had to like,
be ready.
Yeah. So they had to actually, all I remember actually being, oh my gosh, I remember this moment. I was like, to the midwife, Shirley, I'm like, oh my God, I'm freaking out because I think I have to poop right now. She was like, then just go poop. I'm like, like, what do I do? Like, how, that's so uncomfortable. And she's like, just go sit on the toilet for a bit, do what you need to do. Like, it's okay. And I'm like, okay. So I transitioned to the toilet. And when I did, sitting on there was like a different position, and it was nice. And then I had to go number 2. And then I was dealing with contractions at the same time. And at that moment, everybody was like, okay, let's put all of the like sheets on the bed now, right? Because they had to cover the plastic wrap or whatever on the mattress and on the pillows and everything. And then I was able to like get help showering a little bit because I'm like, I don't know, I couldn't like properly wipe myself. It's crazy. It's crazy. And then finally I transitioned back to the bed to be more comfortable. And the funny thing is that because we didn't have a flat surface, they had to figure out a way to get a flat surface into the room. So I just remember going through like a really, really hard contraction. And I told everybody at this point, I'm like, guys, when I'm going through a contraction, I need total quiet. No one can talk. Like, please just, I need total silence so I can focus. And then I remember from the corner of my eye and like my mind, I remember my dad and Rory trying to fit in my desk from my office and through the bedroom for a flat surface. And they're just trying to get through the door, and they're like, oh, it's not going to fit. It's not going to fit. Back up, back up. And my dad being like, no, try turning it this way. Try turning it this way. And they're like whispering. And in the back of my subconscious mind, I'm like finding it like hilarious, but I'm like going through a contraction. So I'm like not laughing at all. But they ended up figuring out how to get that flat surface in. But oh my gosh, I needed total silence. And I was like so adamant about that. It's crazy.
And can you imagine like in a hospital having multiple nurses and midwives and people coming and going and asking you questions during contractions? And then like once you're pushing, more people come in, like so many disturbances.
I could not. And that is exactly why I have so much respect for every woman, no matter how they give birth at a hospital. Like I actually think a hospital is harder to give birth in because of that.
Yeah, you have to overcome so much more in the environment that's not supporting what's going on inside. Absolutely. I do too. I have incredible respect for women who do that. And I know home birth's not for everyone. And also hospital birth isn't for everyone. So thank God we have those options. We need more options for women. But that's why I'm full support of like informed consent and women birthing where they choose to and where they feel safest. So, but the environment plays such a role, and we don't often think that. We think that like birth happens from outside of us and it's totally random and anything can go wrong at any time, right? And you never know what to expect. But really so much of birth plays out in our mindset, number one, and how we're approaching it. So like the way that you cultivated your mindset and manifested your birth and you were visualizing what was happening, you were connected to your body. I think that really benefited you in a big way. And then you can also see how like throughout, like I'm noticing as you're telling your story, like when you were in your head and trying to control things and like, you know, do this, do that, and this isn't ready, like that's probably causing low levels of adrenaline and cortisol in your body. So that could be making labor more painful. Because any tension in the body is going to cause pain, right? So that's sort of the basis of when you talk about pain-free birth. If some of you are wondering, like, what is pain-free birth? Is that even, that's like an oxymoron. Birth is supposed to be painful. Well, my course is like called pain-free birth, because in the fear, tension, pain cycle, if we're afraid of something, and another way you can look at it is if you're trying to control something, if you're trying to stay in your thinking brain, if you're trying to make sure everything's perfect, like that's fear. Control is just like another word for fear. Anything we're afraid of, we try to control. So even if that's your environment and you're like, okay, we need this set up, we need flat surfaces, we need a birth pool, we need to make sure the lights are on, we need to make sure the dog is okay. Like all of that is your thinking brain, and you're not allowing yourself to go into your primal brain, into your birthing body, and it's keeping you up here, which is releasing adrenaline and cortisol, and your sympathetic nervous system is activated, which causes tension in your body, which then causes pain. So those subtle thoughts, those subtle, like ways of being actually influence how you experience labor contractions. And probably even when your husband was saying like, don't lean on the counter, you probably had a more painful contraction in that moment.
Yeah, it's true.
Or, like, and we think, oh my gosh, I can't do this, labor is too hard, something's wrong. It's not, it's just what's happening in our body in that moment is intensifying the contraction. But then when your mom is sitting there like rubbing your belly and comforting you, were those contractions like easier to manage? Than yeah, exactly.
By far, yeah.
And so the pain is like diminished or even like completely gone if you're in a state of relaxation. Why? Because you have oxytocin. Oxytocin blocks pain receptors. So when you have oxytocin, which is the love hormone, the receptors on your uterus like pull in all the oxytocin, and that blocks the pain signal from going to your body. So you can have really strong contractions, but not feel pain because the oxytocin is working in your body. So even when you said your labor started right after you were cuddling with your husband, my brain was like, oh, oxytocin.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you have physical human touch, when you're cuddling with someone. Even like orgasm is a surge of oxytocin. Oxytocin's a love hormone. And it doesn't surprise me that your labor started then, because you got in that cuddling moment a little surge of oxytocin that might have been just enough to tip the scales to then start labor.
Yeah. And actually something else that happened the day before we finished our bathroom renos, just the day before. And on top of that, I remember you saying in the course, like saying, yeah, at one point I just had to submit my taxes to not have that stress in the back of my mind. And then when I submitted my taxes, that's when everything started going into motion. And the same thing happened to me that week. We finished our bathroom renos. That's a whole nother story. Like they got delayed but it happened like the day before. And then I finished my taxes that week. And that's everything just came.
Your body knows. Your body knows if there's a stress in your life until it's resolved or you are able to let go of it, it probably won't go into labor. And I know that now so well. If there's anything stressful going on in my life, I'm like, nope, I'm not going into labor until this day, until this is over. And like clockwork, it happens every time.
Yeah. And I had that in mind too. It's so funny because during the renos, like Rory's like, what if the baby comes during renos? And I was kind of like, I know it's not, because I'm too stressed about the renos happening while baby comes that it's not going to happen. Like thanks to you like sharing that. So yeah. And I love it. Yeah. I love that you touch on like the different hormones, because you like scientifically explain what actually goes on in our bodies to help us be able to work with our bodies the way they were meant to give birth naturally. So so I was keeping that in mind. And it's so funny because as soon as someone was like, talking and I was getting distracted in my mind through my breathing, the contractions were more painful. But if I was like, guys, I really need quiet when I'm going through a contraction. You guys can tell through my breathing, through my sounds when I'm breathing out. And then when I did have that quiet, they were so much more manageable. So exactly like you mentioned. And so as I was going through this like journey of, the contractions intensifying and everything, I was thinking about the amount of transformation that you were talking about in the course, which I think we can touch on. I'm trying to think of like, maybe. Yeah, because it's like the way you explained it was so beautiful in the program. But basically, you're talking about how we're going through different altered states of consciousness, right? We're going from beta, which is us being our most conscious self, to alpha, to theta, to delta. And it's kind of this
Yeah.
journey as if we're going up a mountain, and it's like hard along the way. It's getting harder. It's getting harder. You don't think you can do it. And but as you're going up this mountain, you have to go in deeper and deeper and find this deeper strength within you. And the only way you could do that is go into, like, close your eyes, go into this whole new world. I felt like I was like on the biggest meditation journey of my life. I felt like I was out in the universe. Like, it was, at time didn't exist. Like, it was
Yeah.
incredible. And yeah,
Right.
I can't tell you, as I'm telling the story, I can't tell you what happened at what time past kind of the beginning of it all.
Yeah.
So there was a point where there were 2 or 3 moments when I was just like, why did I choose to do this? Like, I want an epidural. And that thought came to my head. And then I'm like, no, because if I want an epidural, I'd have to go to the hospital. And that just seemed like the biggest mission to me. And I knew every contraction leading up to that epidural would be so much more intense and painful, that I'm like, no, 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 Sarah, it's okay. This is the better choice for you right now. Like, you can do this, you can do this. So I remember in the program you were talking about how there's going to be moments where you're like, what? Well, I don't know if I can keep going. Right. And I had those moments, but then your amount of transformation popped into my head. I'm like, no, I can do this. Like, if so many other women can do this, if Karen can do this, like, I can do this.
Oh.
And so that was so helpful. And yeah, getting into that state was so fascinating. And then there
I
was a
love how
point.
like what
Yeah.
you needed came to you in that moment. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't because you had it on a cheat sheet or you had a reminder card. And like we do all those things to get ready for birth, especially like type A moms, which I'm guessing you probably are, as like a woman running a business and like
Yeah.
making sure her husband's got, get that cheat sheet out, you know, like you seem like a very type A person. And but we're so good at like being prepared and having all our like to-do lists checked off. And yet in labor, like that part of your brain is not available to you.
Yeah. It's
And you
so
shouldn't be.
true. It's
If
so
you
true.
like, if you're relying on that, you're not in labor land. You're not surrendering. You're not going into the deepest part of you, and you're actually like hindering the labor process if you're stuck there trying to control and manage labor. You can't
Yeah.
manage birth, especially in those later stages. And so, but I just love how like as you're telling your story, you're like the images, the visualizations, the concepts that you needed in that moment came to you because it was inside you. And I just
Yeah.
love that. And just to like speak, if you want, I'll share like a bit about that, the what I call like the Mount of Transformation. It's a class I have in my childbirth e-course, my Theme for Birth childbirth e-course. And when we think of birth and how they teach birth in medical school and how they teach it in even most childbirth education classes, is that it's linear. So you've got first stage labor, which is dilating from 0 to 10 centimeters, which I talked about a little bit. And then you've got second stage labor, which is pushing. So that's after you're fully dilated. And a lot of people forget about this stage. They think you just got to get to 10 centimeters, but you actually have to push that baby out.
Yeah.
It's not over at 10. And that could take hours, especially in a hospital. If you're laying on your back and they're coaching you to hold your breath and push and you're spreading your knees, that could average pushing time for a first time mom is 2 hours. And most people don't know that. And it can be 3 to 4, that's average. So that means it could be 3 to 4 hours. I've heard even 5 hours, which is horribly unhealthy for your pelvic floor, but that's a whole nother topic. And so you've got the second stage of labor, which is pushing until the baby is born. And then you've got a third stage of labor, which is the afterbirth. So that's between the baby being born and the placenta being delivered. So we tend to think in terms of linear and, you know, like 1 centimeter per hour dilation. And they have all these like terms and charts and ways to calculate it. And they base it, oh, well, she's been in labor this long and she's a first time mom and she's only progressed this much. So we should do Pitocin and speed it up and da, da, da. They have all these things, but birth is not linear. It's never a textbook birth. So the way I teach it in this class is that it's like climbing a mountain. And we talk about the brainwaves, which is this, if you study the altered states of consciousness, you can, you know, Google this, like a lot of creative people will talk about being in alpha state, because in alpha state, your brainwaves are slowing down. Like thinking is what we're doing when we're talking right now, and you're talking in beta state. But when you slow your brainwaves down, that's when ideas come to you. That's when your creativity really flows. Like, it's like when you're in the shower and this idea of this moment of revelation comes to you, or you're driving and you're just kind of, you're not like thinking about where you have to turn because you've done the route before, but you're getting ideas. It's like you don't really get those creative outbursts until you take a moment to yourself. But then there's like deeper levels of altered states of consciousness where we go into theta, which is almost like in sleep, when you're, even when we go through sleep cycles, we go through these stages and your brain waves slow considerably. And then so theta is like a trance like state, and delta is even deeper. That's like deep trance, or like almost out of body experiences. And birth, what we don't realize is birth is designed to take you into those altered states of consciousness. And I love how you explained it, like the higher up you went in the mountain being like early labor takes a long time. So if you've ever hiked a mountain, I just hiked one last week, not a high one, super big one, but it's like a 3-hour, trek. And the whole first, most of the hike is like the foothills, like you're walking and it's not super steep, but it takes a little while until you actually get to where you're really hiking, where you're going uphill. So early labor is kind of like that. You can go about your day and you're walking along the foothills. And then active labor is like you're trekking, you're going uphill, your heart's beating, like it's hard work. You have to concentrate. You have to watch out where your foot goes so that you don't trip and fall in a route or hurt yourself. And then like active labor is when you are climbing that peak, and it's the most intense part. That'd be like transition that we talk about, those where you were probably like, maybe I should get an epidural, but then you're like, I don't want to go to the hospital. That's like the climbing the peak of that mountain. And in those states, you're right, you have to like disconnect from your thinking brain, and your birth is drawing you, all the hormones happening, and these fluctuations are actually pulling you deeper into an altered state. And the higher you go, like the altitude changes. So you have to go more and more inward. That's why people all around you were disrupting you if you heard them, because any kind of disturbance like that is pulling you out of your altered state of consciousness.
That's what it felt like. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to stay inward, which is where your body does its most effective work. And the higher you get, the more it demands you are fully present in your body, not present in the room around you and what's going on. Like you can't, like is the dog okay? It should be like so far out of your consciousness at that stage. But if you're clinging to, is the dog okay? Or am I going to break the sink counter? Or does my husband have the cheat sheet? Like whatever the thing is, it's going to keep you in your beta brain, and your body, you're going to be fighting with your body to like, okay, I got to manage it. I got to control something. But your body's like, no, you have to surrender.
Yes.
We have to go deeper. We're climbing the throat, like you're in the throes of labor. You don't have capacity to do both. It's either you are present in your body or you are speaking and talking to somebody. You can't, like, that's why women don't have words in active labor. And I say, to husbands and partners, like, don't ask them any questions at this point in labor, which I find hilarious when like medical professionals are running through like a list of 20 pages of consent forms when she's in like transition, like she can't comprehend anything you're saying.
I can't imagine that experience. It's like, oh my gosh.
Which you would have had to do if you chose epidural.
Yeah.
Right.
And oh my gosh, the word surrender, like that word popped up to me so many times as well. And actually there was a moment where I was like, okay, this is the moment I think I need to go in the tub. I need hot water. I was experiencing shivers like so much throughout the whole birth. And our bedroom is actually really cold because it's not properly insulated, which we need to get fixed. So I was like, is the heat up in here? Is the heat up in here? And they're like, the heat is up in the house and it's blasting. You're just like, it's just your body's going through a lot. So I was shivering the whole time, which was crazy. So I was like, okay, maybe let's draw me a bath. I had like back pain as well. And so I was like, okay, I want a bath. And then I remember we threw out the bathtub plug. Like a month ago, Rory threw out the bathtub plug because it was like really old and we needed a new one. It was like gross. It was like really, really old. And I'm like, no. Why did you throw it out? Like, let's keep it. Again, A-type in me, like, let's keep it until we have the new one. And he's like, oh, well, it's already in the garbage. Sorry. I'm like, okay, whatever. And then he's like, he's like, oh wait, Sarah, we can't because we don't have a bathtub plug. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Can someone go get one? And I didn't know what time it was. And it was like, apparently it was like 6:30 in the morning. So my dad, he went out to go find a bathtub plug. And the first place he went to was, this is another just funny story that I know my listeners will really appreciate because they love funny stories, is he went to a gas station. That was the first stop. And he's like, hey guys, it's like 6:30 a.m. And he has a bit of like a little bit of a Polish accent. He's like, do you guys have a bathtub plug? And they're like, what? He's like, bathtub plug. The way he kept saying it, they're like, what? He's like, bathtub plug, like a plug for the bath. He's like, I really need one. And it's like 6:30 a.m. They're looking at him like he's like, what? And they're like, sorry, no, we don't have them. He like drives over to Walmart. Luckily it's open. And it's so funny. My dad is a night owl and he works for himself. So he always sleeps till like noon and like stays up all night. So for him being at Walmart at like 6:30 a.m. was like this like new world. He's like, what the hell am I doing here? It's like crickets. And he's like going to get a bathtub plug. And he ended up finding one and he comes back and he's like, I found it. And then by that point, I was already in active pushing and he's like, he felt like such a hero. He's like, I got the bathtub plug. And he comes back there like, yeah, she doesn't need it anymore. So that was a funny little side story. But basically in that moment when I found out that there was no bathtub plug and I really wanted that bath so badly. And I'm like, that's the only way I'll find comfort. And when I found out that it wasn't there and when it was taking so long to get the other one, I had to actually surrender to, hey, you might not get the bath. And I had to like, just like surrender and figure out a different way. So I ended up leaning over my nightstand table, standing and leaning. And that was what felt most comfortable. And the midwife, I had like back pain and I was leaning on it for like freaking hour, they said. And she was like slowly starting to massage my lower back and swing my hips side to side. And I'm like, oh yeah, my gosh, that helps so much. And so she had Rory take over. And so he was just like behind me, hands on, like swaying my hips. And then out of nowhere, I don't know, time doesn't exist for me at this point. I don't know how long into it this was, but this is the point where out of like I was just, blood was coming out, like water. That's where my like water really, really broke. And they had like pads underneath me. They had to like move the carpet from where it was, everything. And then out of nowhere, I had this like primal urge to just like my knees like buckled under me. And I went into a squat from standing. I was like, and I like roared like a freaking lion so loud. I never knew I could roar like that. And it was just like this urge to push. And I'm like, this is what Karen was talking about. I'm like, this is the urge to push. And so I was like,
unmistakable.
And it was just like, I did that for, and then the midwife is like, whoa, did you have the urge? Was that an urge to push? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is going by so quickly. And I don't even remember at what point, because I remember at one point she's like, okay, I'm calling for backup for like 2 other midwives to come. And I don't know if that was before or after. I don't know. But this was about 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m. And I remember just like as I was going through those like big roars and big like squats to like just push a little bit more. I remember like hearing Rory like sniffling in the back behind me, and I turn around and he's like shedding his like first tear. I'm like, oh my God, you're so cute in between contractions. And then I got really tired being in that position. I'm like, I need to switch. And I'm like, I just want to get on all fours on the bed. And again, this is like you teaching, you're like, you know what you need, you know what your body needs. And again, if you're in that like deeper state of like theta or delta, you just follow that, right? So I was just following what my intuition needed. So I went on all fours and I had more of those like roaring moments. And then came the moment where I think she checked it. I don't even remember how dilated I was. I don't even remember them ever saying you're 10 centimeters dilated or anything, but she's like, Sarah, I suggest you trying to lay on your side. And I'm like, oh no, I don't want to lay down. That's like what you mentioned was like, you can't even fathom moving into a different position because like the head is like there and it feels uncomfortable. And they're like, just like, it's okay if you don't want to try it. It's up to you, but we would just suggest it. It could be more comfortable for you. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to try it. So I lay on my side, they held my leg up a little bit. And that's when the active pushing started, because actually my whole body was able to relax more, because outside of that I was standing a lot, I was on my fours, I was using my arm strength a lot, and I was able to just like lean back sideways and relax. And I remember specifically being, I don't want to be on my back, I don't want to be on my back, because all I could think was like you teaching how it's not with like gravity. That's why I wanted to be standing or on all fours, because I wanted gravity to help bring the baby down. But then when I was like, okay, you know what? It feels good on my side, I'm just going to follow that. It's okay. And that's when active pushing started for me, which was, oh my goodness. Like, I remember she was coaching me through, like, cause I was like being really loud. I was like, "Rah," right. And she coached me through going in deeper with every contraction, with how hard I pushed in a way, because I was doing it kind of like in really short spurts. And I kind of went, that's when I went more inward. I feel like to delta or something. That was like the shift where I'm like, I have to go even deeper inside me to be able to, because I was freaking out in that moment. I'm like, I have to get the head out. I'm like, this is like so intimidating, right? So I just went into this, like, whenever I would take a breath in and then push. And this is where I was also trying J breathing at some point, but I also forgot to do it many times, which I'm sure we could touch on as well. But the J, like, the J breathing helped a lot. And I basically had my eyes closed, pushed a little bit longer than I thought I could. And that was helping so much. And when I had my eyes closed, I literally thought I was in outer space, which was crazy. But maybe you can touch on what J breathing is in this moment.
Yeah. So what I teach for second stage when the baby is coming is, instead of holding your breath, which they'll teach you to do in the hospital, what that does is it tenses everything. So you could do it right now. Like if you're listening, you could just take a breath and then imagine like pushing while you're holding your breath, as if you were like pushing out a poop or a baby. I mean, that's kind of funny. But if you become present and aware of what's happening in your pelvic floor, which would be like your vagina, like what's happening to those muscles when you hold a breath, they tighten and like pull up, right? So, and then now trying to push into tight, pulled up muscles. Imagine having to push a baby through tight, pulled up muscles. So like when I hold my breath, my pelvic floor goes like this, I don't know if that's kind of the sensation you're feeling, but generally like, we kind of sit up, everything clenches up. Now, if you push in that state, you're pushing against tight, pulled up muscles, and trying to push a 8-pound or so baby through tight muscles is going to cause a lot of pelvic floor damage. And that's why you see women all over the world today with pelvic floor prolapse. Moms joke about constantly like peeing when they laugh. And that's because they pushed out babies with forceful purple pushing, doing it the way that they coach you to do in the hospitals, and it damages your pelvic floor, it weakens those pelvic floor muscles. So what I teach is a whole different topic, a whole different conversation. You'll have to get the e-course to really get the full teaching on it, because I probably won't do it justice in this podcast. But instead of holding your breath, you're using your breath to push the baby down. So your pelvic floor is open and relaxed, and you're breathing instead of breathing. So like I'll teach throughout the most of the early and active labor, you're breathing in for 4, out for 8, like making it really those slow breaths you talked about. And some people say 8, some people say 4. The number doesn't really matter as long as it's really slow and the exhale is longer than the inhale. That's going to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, relax all your muscles, reduce pain, reduce tension. In pushing, you want to use a different technique that I found incredibly effective for pushing. And so what that does is you're breathing not just into your belly, but almost into your pelvic floor, into your lower back. So when you breathe in, it's inflating your hips, it's coming all the way down, and you're forcing, it's like almost a forceful breath, because those contractions are so intense. So you're shooting your breath all the way down to your butt, and then it curls up. And as you do that, what I do is I visualize that breath shifting that baby down. So my pelvic floor is opening and expanding, not contracting and tightening. And that makes all the difference in how effective you push, in how long you're pushing. So this will take pushing from hours to 10, 20, 30 minutes, or even just a few pushes. Many women say they took my course and baby was out in a few pushes or 15 to 20 minutes. Why? Because you're not working against your body. Your pelvic floor is open and relaxed because that's what its job is. It's not to tighten in labor and pushing, especially. Its job is to get out of the way. And what you do when you hold your breath to push is that you're activating your pelvic floor muscles to try to push the baby out, but they're not designed to do that, which, as I said, leads to pelvic floor damage.
Yeah.
Your uterus, which has been building strength throughout the whole labor, is the one that's supposed to push. That's the engine. That's going to shoot it out like a piston. The pelvic floor moves out of the way. So the breath is really just to facilitate the pelvic floor opening. And then the breath is like a visual aid as well to help imagine shifting that baby down. So I break that down a lot more in my e-course. And what that does is it creates openness and space in the pelvic floor, which is really tight. And as you can probably attest to, like that pressure is so intense.
Yeah.
The breath helps open that space and relax those muscles so that your uterus can do the hard job of pushing down. And so how did that feel? I'm curious, how did that feel for you? Did it feel like it worked, or was it, because some women say it's hard to, it wasn't working, or like, everyone kind of has a different feedback on it. Like sometimes it takes a while to get used to because it's very different. Like we're used to breathing up like this, and even some yoga. And I had a client that did yoga and she was like, oh, so I'm used to like pulling up. And I'm like, she's like, so everything is going down. I'm like, yeah, it's all going down and out the butt.
Yeah.
You know, motion. So how did it feel for you?
So I feel like because of like, I was just it's so interesting because I feel like I was going back between like maybe like alpha, theta within the like my active pushing was an hour and a half. That's what Rory told me. I didn't know, but that's what he told me. And I feel like I was going kind of more back and forth between the different states because I got in my head a little bit about, oh my God, I had to bring a baby's head out. And I was kind of like getting into panic mode a little.
Freaked you out a little bit.
Yeah, it did. It did. Yeah. And so I actually forgot about J breathing. And I remembered at one point, I'm like, J breathing. And then I tried it, but I don't remember when, and I don't remember for how long. But one thing I do wish is that I practiced it more before, because it would have been more ingrained in me, because I don't think I utilized it enough for sure. So I think that would have helped a lot, because that was a little bit more challenging because I got into my head a little bit with getting the head out. But I was kind of like going back and forth between, I would say, theta and delta or something. And
so, you can do that. Like women do that all the time. And I would do that. I remember coming out of that active pushing phase after having my eyes closed for like 20 minutes and not knowing whether it was 2 hours or 20 minutes and how much time had passed. And looking around the room and being like, oh, wow, everyone's around me. Oh, the fan is on. All of a sudden I'm back in the present moment. And then I'd close my eyes and go back into theta or alpha. And we have that ability as women, which I think is pretty amazing, to like shift very rapidly between those states. So it's not a bad thing. And we're able to do that. It's when we're really clinging to something in beta, where we're thinking and trying to control something and we can't go deep. But once you're deep, you can like show up again and beta and alpha and then dip back. It's like you come up for air. Oh, okay. It's still safe out here. Okay, I'm going back under.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's how that felt. And there was like I remember like working on pushing out the head, and I just had this moment of like, guys, I feel like I'm failing. It's so funny. I'm all about like personal development, high achiever, like all these things. And I'm like, I feel like I'm failing. I feel like I'm not like doing this like fast enough. And then everybody in the room, it was the 3 midwives and Rory. There was one like trainee midwife, and they're all like, no, you're doing so great. You're doing so well. And just hearing that was so helpful. It like put me right back at ease, because I had no idea what's going on down there. I didn't know at one point. I'm like, is the head out? Is it not? Do I keep going in it? So I'd ask, I'm like, is the head out? They're like, no, about like a third. I'm like, a third. Okay. And I'm like, okay, just like refocus. So yeah, it was like this intense journey. And
Yeah.
I remember there was a point where, so my midwife said that my perineum is half the size. It's very short. It's half the size of a normal, on average, what she sees. So she was like, ooh, like, I don't know how she's not gonna tear. So they had to like be down there, like massaging me, stretching me out a little bit with like olive oil. And there was a moment where his head was coming out like the widest part, I guess. And
Yep.
she's like,
Crowning. Yeah.
yeah. And she's like, okay, so you're gonna hold it there, don't keep pushing. And I'm like, but I have the urge to push. And she's like, but if you keep pushing, you're gonna tear, and let's just follow my coaching,
Yeah.
and you let's get you not to tear. And I'm like, oh, this is so hard. She's like, it's okay, I know it's hard, it's okay. I'm like, okay, I can do this. And I would have
Feel
to
the ring of
like,
fire.
yeah, I would have to hold it. And then
Yeah.
at one point when it was like, oh yeah, at that point, I think I even felt his eyes opening and closing, which was so weird. It felt like a little alien was coming outside of me. So I felt
Oh,
like eyes
wow.
blinking, and his
Like inside you
like no, like on
on
the
his way out.
on the border. Yeah, when he was like, when I had to hold him there, he was just
Yeah.
like opening and closing his eyes, and it was right on the cusp of the what was
Perineum.
stretching.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I
That's
was like, oh,
amazing. I've
that's
never heard
so
that before.
odd. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
No,
very,
I mean, usually it kind of happens so quick, but I can understand how that is possible. Like, because as you're crowning, the perineum kind of goes down over the baby's face,
yeah,
from forehead down their eyes. And if you hold it there right at their
yeah.
eyes, if they blink, yeah, you could probably,
It was,
I've never
yeah.
heard of that. So that's so cool.
Yeah, that was really interesting. And I just remember Rory being right by my side on the bed. I was squeezing his hand so much, and it was just so nice having him there. And then she's like, okay, good job holding it. And then she's like, okay, push a little bit more, push a little bit more. And um yeah, and I obviously did it when I felt the urge to push. So I always remembered, I'm like, priority is to push when I'm feeling the urge. And
Yeah.
that was beautiful because she understood that. Like, midwives are amazing, and so they prescribe to that anyway. But I remember at one point when I was getting, when his head was coming out at kind of like the widest part, and it was actually like, okay, now it's coming out more. I remember I was like, I yelled, I feel like my clit's gonna tear. And I was just like, that was the most scariest moment for me,
So,
because I thought it was going to split fully in half, the whole thing. Like, that's how much pressure
wow.
was everywhere. And I think that was like probably the hardest moment, the pinnacle hard moment. And then they're
Yeah.
like, it's okay, that's not happening, it's okay. And I'm like, okay. And then the head came out, but I didn't know, which was weird. It just felt like a more of a relief or something. And then I'm like, at one point, they're like, okay, the head is out. I'm like, oh my God, really? And then I was like, two stage or something. Cause you mentioned the two-stage active pushing, right? Where you wait for the
Right.
baby's shoulders to rotate a bit to come out of the widest part
Yeah,
of your
you
pelvis,
wait for
right?
the neck. Yeah, so the head comes out, and then you wait for the next contraction to birth the rest of the body, which gives
Yeah.
the baby time to rotate. There's an external rotation that happens after the head comes out. There's an internal one too, which I talk about in e-course, and that's so important. And then head comes out, external rotation so that the shoulders can fit, which will prevent shoulder dystocia. Um, and then, so you typically wait till the next contraction to push the rest of the body out. Sometimes your body just does it all in one fetal ejection reflex and it all comes out. But what you see a lot of times in the hospital is, or even with midwives, this isn't exclusive to like doctors, they'll start pulling on or twisting that baby's head to try to manually externally rotate the baby, which is kind of damaging to the baby's myofascial structure, can cause a lot of problems breastfeeding, a lot of pain in the baby, which we don't know, but a lot of babies come out with torticollis when there's a lot of manhandling of that baby's head to get them to externally rotate, all from the perspective that we have to get this baby out faster, sooner than later, because otherwise mom could hemorrhage, they could have shoulder dystocia. And so in their haste to deliver baby, they can actually cause more problems than if they just waited for the next contraction.
Yeah.
So you can advocate for a two-step delivery, which is allowing that baby to be born in essentially like two steps. So the head in one contraction, the body in the second, rather than all in one step and kind of yank that baby out,
Yeah.
which isn't great.
Yeah. Because I
So
remember
you were advocating
specifically,
for,
yeah, because I
yeah.
remember you also mentioned it could also like be hard on the pelvic floor, and like if they, because it
Yeah,
could
if
cause
you're
some
trying to,
damage.
yeah, it can damage mom too if you're trying to
Yeah.
push when you're not having a contraction. And of course, like if baby's heart rate is decelerating, if there's a medical emergency and you have to get that baby out, sometimes you need to do things like that.
Yeah.
But in a normal delivery where baby is fine and blinking and awake and there's nothing wrong, there's no reason to not go slow and allow your body to, as I said, do the heavy lifting, to do the work. So that's great that you advocated for that. Were they receptive to that?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. They're like, yeah, wait for the next contraction.
Good.
And then I remember Rory, this is after he told me, because he it's just so fascinating because Rory didn't know how he would feel about being there for the birth. He was a little freaked out. He's about everything, which is not normal. It's like a new experience in your life, right? And he's just like, I don't know if I'm gonna like look down there. I don't know. I don't know how I'm gonna feel. What I'm scared the most is you being in pain, me being not able to help you and all of that. And then it was so funny because he was like opposite. He was just like, when the moment came, he was like right beside me. He was right in there, like looking, watching, and he was just like, so he wanted to be there. And it was so incredible that, and I didn't care. Like, I'm not like, it was just
You're
like
in your
brought
zone.
us,
You're like,
yeah.
see.
And it like brought us closer that,
Oh,
he just got to see everything, how
he
it
was
happened.
fully
And
present.
yeah. And he told me that at one point when his head was out and we were waiting for like the next contraction, that this little head was just like out and like just like turning around. He's like, it looked like a little like robot, like just like moving its head. It's so odd. Like,
Those are some of the freakiest moments, I'm sure, like especially the dad to be like, what is going
yeah.
on? Or even to like, I've seen that happen too, like to take pictures. I've seen babies so like looking around the room and they're like half bored, like they're like half in
Yeah,
one
half
world,
bored.
half in another, and yet they're so alert. And you don't see that in hospital births. If you've got an epidural, your baby's got the epidural too, like they're drugged too. So a lot of babies, another benefit of a natural or physiological birth is that you've got an alert baby, and you have moments like this that you wouldn't have in a hospital with an epidural and other drugs in your system.
Yeah. And actually, so he said that his head, sorry, the back of his head was facing Rory. So he didn't see the face actually, because that would
Oh,
have been
okay.
a whole nother experience. But he just saw the
Wow.
back of his head just
But
like
he saw
moving.
him moving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
So
okay,
crazy.
so when the next contraction came and I'm like, okay, now I just have to, now it's just the body. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And I was just so motivated in that moment. I'm like, I just want to get this out now. Like, so it pretty much in like one, like push, the rest of the body came out. And I just remember the weirdest feeling, like all these like limbs sliming out. And it was just like one limb, next limb. Like it was just such a different feeling from the head because there's so many
Yeah.
limbs and bones and it feels like more movie. I don't know how to explain that, but yeah, it was so odd. And it just, that moment where it was like, it came, like he came out and they popped him on my chest. I'm like, did I actually just do that? Like, did I actually just do it? And right away I went to thinking of like, oh my God, I got to the top of the mountain. I did it. And just being in awe and shock that it actually happened. So yeah,
Yeah.
but the
That's like the
actual,
first thought is like, I did
yeah,
it. It's over.
yeah. And then the second thought is like, I want to experience this with Rory. And like, you want to like look up at your partner and be like, oh my God, we did it. Cause it's like it's like such a we thing as well. Right. Cause couldn't have done it with his
Yeah.
support and everything. And it was very interesting. And he came out with like a cone head because you know how babies' heads get a little different. So I was like looking down at him like, oh, he has a little cone head. And it was, oh my gosh, it was so fascinating. He was crying right away on my chest. So I had the skin to skin to promote oxytocin and all that. But for some reason, I don't know why I felt a little stressed, like something felt a little off. Um, and I remember I was kind of like in this like, oh my God, I'm this high. It just happened. I gave birth, but I had this like something felt stressed and a little freaked out, kind of very subconsciously within me. And then the midwives are like, Sarah, you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention. And I'm like, huh? And I kind of like came back to consciousness, and apparently I was bleeding a lot. And I'm like, no, this is not what I wanted. This is not what I wanted to happen because I didn't want to get the shot of Pitocin, because I wanted the oxytocin to happen naturally. And because you mentioned in the course that if you have, baby skin to skin on your chest right away, you have that like blissful like moment, it can create oxytocin within your body, which can help prevent like hemorrhaging or bleeding. It's all like interconnected. So
Yeah.
that's what I was like, okay, perfect. Baby is on my chest. That's good. We don't have to do any of that. But they're like, Sarah, you're like bleeding quite a bit. We suggest like giving you oxytocin or Pitocin. And I was like, no, I didn't want it. And they're like, well, like, we wouldn't suggest it if you didn't need it. And I'm like, okay, I trust. Like you also mentioned, like you're like, they at the end of the day, like you also have to trust like who you're working with. And so I in that moment, I'm like, okay, I surrender again. It's okay. Like baby's here, you did it. And so they gave me a shot of oxytocin. And then I was still bleeding. They gave me another shot of oxytocin a bit later on. And then and then they're like, okay, time to birth the placenta. And I totally forgot about that. Or no, first they asked me, they're like, okay, so we've waited about 5 minutes because I wanted the delayed cord clamping, which meant that more nutrients were delivered through the umbilical cord from the placenta to baby, which you taught. And I think you said anything, if you can just extend it like even a minute and hopefully even 10 minutes, then they get so much more, the baby gets so much more benefit from that. So they're like, we've had it for like 5 minutes. Are you okay if we cut the cord? And I'm like, and they showed it to me and it was white. I'm like, yeah, okay, that feels good. And they did that. And then I totally forgot that I had to birth the placenta. And I don't know why I went into like panic mode. I'm like, I have to give birth again. Like, and they're like, Sarah, no, it's not even like the same thing. And they're like, is it okay if we like help you? And they like tug a bit. And I'm like, no, like, I don't know why I have this visual of like, if they tug it a little bit, it just like rips off my uterus and like leaves a wound. And I didn't really want it, but then they're like, but Sarah, we have to because you're still bleeding quite a lot. So we have to do it. I'm like, okay. And I was so stressed in that moment because all I could think of was like, I'm bleeding because maybe they're trying to tug at it. And it was just like a lot going on. But again, I'm like, okay, Sarah, just surrender. And so they helped me birth the placenta, which when it came out, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that wasn't anything. And they had to then, because I think I was all stressed, give me another shot of, I think, Pitocin. So I had 3. And the one thing that I didn't know that they had to do afterwards was press on my uterus and stomach to check for blood clots and all that. And that was very uncomfortable, where I was like, I didn't expect that at all. And I thought it would just be like, baby's on my chest, placenta's gone, all good. And so, but they had to like press and stuff. And I was very uncomfortable. And I actually lost focusing on breathing through that. I was more like tense through that. So I wish that I had just been like, okay, Sarah, you didn't expect this, but it's okay. Just breathe through it because it'll be less uncomfortable. So that happened. But then as soon as that was all good, it was done. And it was just like, yeah, a high that, yeah, I've never experienced. It was incredible. And the special thing was, like I mentioned earlier, my parents spontaneously stayed in the house because I told them, I'm like, if something ends up happening, she wants to go upstairs, you guys can leave. But if not, just stay. I'm happy if you guys stay. And so they heard the first cry. They got to like come up and meet little Ben right away. And so that was such a special moment as well, to just spontaneously have them there. So yeah, that is the story.
So beautiful. And I love that you shared like even the parts that don't go perfectly or that, were scary, because that's like real life, right? Like birth doesn't go perfectly according to plan. And a lot of people think that like, well, I could never do a home birth because what if something goes wrong? And I think this is a great like example of like something where you are bleeding, you needed medical intervention, which I am a full component of, like getting medical intervention when you need it. Don't turn it away, obviously. And if you're bleeding excessively, your midwives did the right thing. They recommended Pitocin, which stops the bleeding. That's exactly what they would have done in a hospital setting. So people think, well, what if you hemorrhage? What if you bleed? Well, a midwife is a trained medical professional. They know how to address those situations. They bring Pitocin with them. So you got 3 shots. And I've also seen If that doesn't do the trick, they can do misoprostol and other medications and even insert it anally, which absorbs very quickly and is very effective at stopping bleeding. And if it was still an issue, or if they felt like we're seeing signs where it's not, effectively working, they would have more than likely like transferred you to care, transferred care to a hospital, but it sounds like Pitocin did the job. So I just want to mention that too, because I know a lot of people have those fears of home birth, like, well, what if something goes wrong? But, well, they bring all of that with them. They bring all that equipment into a home birth. They bring a fetal resuscitation kit. The only thing you really don't have is pain medication, because you need continuous fetal monitoring, and they don't have an OR, so they can't do a cesarean. So if you need those types of interventions, you would transfer care to a hospital. But as far as like bleeding and fetal resuscitation and a lot of those interventions, midwives are really equipped to handle that. And I think the fear and anxiety can definitely influence those things. Like if we're anxious, or or sometimes if
it creates adrenaline, right?
Yeah, it creates adrenaline, which blocks oxytocin, and oxytocin is what causes your contractions to be really strong, whether that's in labor or after birth. And you want really strong contractions after birth, because that uterus has to shrink down rapidly. If it doesn't shrink, you're more likely to hemorrhage and bleed. So the anxiety, the adrenaline can block the oxytocin. So Pitocin is synthetic oxytocin. So it's doing the job oxytocin would do naturally by causing contractions. And when they pressed on your belly like they did, they do that typically in a hospital setting to everybody. And they probably did it for you. Not every home birth midwife does it. Mine didn't do it. But because you were bleeding, they probably said, we need to make sure your uterus is shrinking and contracting by pressing down. So that's another way to help stimulate those contractions and make sure all that the blood clots that they're coming out and you're not internally bleeding. So that's a precautionary measure and a good choice to do in that situation. I mean, I'm not a medical provider, but it sounds like your midwives knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And that's great. They intervened when it was necessary, and they didn't when it was not necessary, which is what you want, right?
Yeah. And what I was so impressed with is they did it so calmly. They didn't because I told them my birth plan of like what I needed, the energy that I needed. They're, instead of being like, Sarah, like you're bleeding, we need to do this now. Like they were just like, so Sarah, I know you don't want it, but we really highly recommend it right now. And like just in that calm voice. And because she was calm, I was like, okay, I trust you. And like,
which is perfect, because they understand that, oh, if we stress mom out, she's more likely to bleed more.
Yeah,
they get it. So they're not going to bring more unnecessary stress to the situation. They're going to do what they have to do instead of freaking out. And what you see in hospitals with that panic at the littlest red flag is it causes so much anxiety in mom that, bleeding becomes more common. Fetal distress becomes more common because mom is stressed. So therefore, baby is stressed. Therefore, oxytocin's not working. Therefore, she's more likely to hemorrhage. Like you have this snowball effect when providers are not paying attention to mom's emotional state and her emotional health. But with a midwife, she understands that physiological process and how those hormones play out. So she's more likely to calmly say, hey, so we have some bleeding. We want to take care of it like this. And she's also getting informed consent, which is so important.
Yeah.
So I think that she handled it really well. And that's great. And you got to still have that bonding time. You got to stay with baby, because what that does is it avoids a hospital transfer where you now have a disruption in that process more, and you have a separation. But because they handled it so well, you could stay home with your baby and keep that bonding intact.
Yeah. And I love how you just explained so beautifully in your course how we need to take a holistic approach to birth, like mind, emotion, what are the things that mind,
like
body,
spirit,
soul,
body,
emotion, like all of it, and how the hospital typically only focuses on the physical, the body, right? But we need to also remember like how she's feeling, the mental state, like all of that. And it's all like a whole process. It's interlinked and
because that flows through to what your body does physically. It's not just like, oh, we don't need, like people think, oh, you have to have all these high risk things in place because we want the mom and baby to be healthy. Like healthy mom, healthy baby is the only thing that matters. And what we don't realize is that when you take care of mom's emotional health and her spiritual health and her mental well-being, the physical is much better off. She has a
Yes.
healthier outcome in her pregnancy, physically speaking, less intervention rates, less cesarean rates, less fetal distress, less hemorrhaging, because we're taking care of those other needs as well. When we ignore those, we blow past those and we just only focus on what the machines tell us and the numbers and the charts, we're more likely to create stress and chaos and have higher rates of interventions. And that's why you see such high rates in our hospital systems, because we don't understand the physiological process and how we are holistic beings. We are mind, body, soul, and spirit, not just a body, not just a machine, right?
Yeah.
It's so much more than that. So I teach birth from that perspective. And when we understand that, we can partner with all of those layers of who we are in our being, because birth is not just linear. It's not just your body opens and makes a hole that's 10 centimeters wide and plops out a baby, and oh, it's not working, let's cut you, let's push on baby, the mentality we have in our culture, or oh, the baby got stuck and oh, your hips are too, we're not machines.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many layers of things that are going on under the surface, the mental headspace. Even when you're talking about the fear of, oh, I have to push out a baby's head, that fear, that foreboding thing is actually even communicating to your body, I don't know if I can do this. And I think it's so interesting. And I don't know, this is just a hypothesis, but that your midwife said your perineum was smaller than usual.
They said it after. They said it after.
Right.
Yeah. So I didn't know
so
this during it. They said it after. They're like, after the whole birth happened, they're like, yeah, we were looking and your perineum was really small. So we were actually really surprised that you didn't tear there. So
yeah,
they didn't.
You did. I was going to ask you didn't tear?
Oh yeah, I didn't tear. Oh yeah. So let's just, I'm going to wrap everything up with a bow. So my manifestation.
Well, wait, let me finish my thought.
Okay. Yeah. Go. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was just saying, I think it's so interesting, your anxiety of, I have to push out a baby's head. I don't know if I can do that. And what your midwife is observing down there that you can't see is your perineum's really small. And there's this direct connection between the mind-body connection where you're telling yourself, I don't know if I can push out a baby's head. And your body gets that message.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just stay small. Whereas I don't know if you read in the Ina May Gaskin's book, she talks about a woman who said, how am I going to push out a baby's head? She's like, how am I going to get big enough to do that? And she was having the same concern, the same fear you were expressing. And Ina May, the midwife, said, oh, don't worry. When it's time, you're going to get huge. And she did this motion with her hands. And so in labor, the woman kept rolling around, that thought kept rolling around in her head. I'm going to get huge. I'm going to get huge. And in the moment, the midwives told her later, it was crazy. I've never seen someone do this that quickly, but you got huge all of a sudden. That baby's head was coming and you just went like this.
Oh my god.
Exactly the visualization she was thinking. And so I just wonder, even that fear, that thought of how am I going to push out a baby's head could have manifested as a small perineum. Yeah. Even though you birthed fine, you didn't even tear. And part of that is credit to how you pushed and your midwives coaching you to go really slow. That's how you prevent tearing, is all about going really slow and steady in those final pushes. But I just I think it's so, I love dissecting birth like that and finding those mind body connections, because our bodies are so intelligent and they really listen to the beliefs and the thoughts we have in those processes. And it's a very immediate cause and effect that we can see in labor when we're thinking positive thoughts or negative thoughts. But I just love that you were able to even overcome those fears. And I love talking about those fears. What were the moments where you thought you couldn't do it? What were the moments where you thought, sorry, I'm getting
that's okay. It's okay.
What were the moments where you were ready to give up? What were the moments where it was painful, or you thought you couldn't, you're afraid of something? I love being real about that, because we all have those moments where we're I don't know if I can do this, or it's going to take 20 hours. How long?
Oh my gosh. And I love that you shared that story again, because you just I totally remember you sharing that in the course. And I'm like, okay, noted for next labor, that story will come to me and I'm going to say to myself, I'm going to get huge. Right. What's so funny too, I don't know if you experienced this, but as soon as when the day was just unfolding and we're like, oh my gosh, I I have a baby now. And it was just like a handful of hours after birth. Roy and I have always talked about like, we want 2 kids minimum. And I already went to my mind being like, oh my God, I have to do this all over again in the future. Like, it's so funny. I'm just like, okay, I don't know if I don't know if I want to do this again, because it's so intense. And of course, I'm like so close to the experience. And with going through it the first time, it's like, maybe next time I will think of J breathing sooner, and I'll have that less like intense experience and all of that. But I went straight to like, I don't know if I want to do this again, like right away.
Yeah, in that moment, it's always intense. But
Yeah.
I love how you were like, so I think it's easy. We're always our own worst critics, you know, like you said, even like you were, the anxiety you experienced, or like, I think when you said like, I think I'm failing, I think I'm doing it wrong. Like,
Yeah.
I think we are all like, especially in those heated moments, like we're always our own worst critics. And something too that like it can be really helpful, especially if you feel disconnected to like what's going on down there. Like, is the head out? How close am I? Like, just reach down and touch, reach down and feel your baby's head, because that connects these like neural pathways that you weren't connected before. And then your body knows and your mind knows exactly what to do, because it like feels the presence of where your baby is and connects these dots for you, and can really give you a lot of motivation too. But we always like, I think it's so common to like overanalyze our birth, either in the middle of labor and be like, is this painful? Is this not painful? What am I doing wrong? Or like immediately after and be like, okay, I don't know if I should do that again. Should I do that again? Where did I fail? What should I have done better? How should I, like, which is totally type A of you, and I love you for it. You know, but like, resist the urge to judge your birth in the middle of your birth and immediately after your birth. Because you're just gonna see only the like one or two things you did wrong or could have done better, and not like the overall picture of how transformational it really was, and how like you could look at it and go, wow, I really surrendered. I really went deeper than I've ever gone before. I accomplished something that I've never done, and I overcame fear, and I did like, I just like those prayers, those manifestations that you had before, like look at the whole picture of what you did and what you accomplished, not at like the 2 or 3 things you could have done better.
Oh my gosh. So it's so funny, because what I do is I always like, I celebrate the accomplishment that I've had and whatever challenge I have in my life. And I'm like, I did it, I did that, and everything you just said. But then it's like more like, I think I could extend the celebration much longer, because I always go into, okay, what could I do better next time? I'm all about like personal development and growth.
Which is
and
what makes you so successful probably in your like professional life, because you're always growing and perfecting your process.
But I love that you mentioned that. You're like, look at everything you did so well and so right. And actually one thing that I remember is this feeling of it was kind of like a scary moment of oh my gosh, I have no choice but I have to continue and give birth. This was like during one of those harder moments where I'm like, oh, epidural seems very tempting, right? And it's like it's very rare in life that you don't have a choice. You have to. It's like, I have to do this. I have to give birth, especially after you're 8 centimeters or something. You can't get an epidural. You just have to do it. And it's like, I had to figure out in that moment how to not panic about that. I had to figure out how to like accept it and be like, this is my chance to like grow and have this experience and see what I'm capable of. And I had to coach myself that way in order to get through it, because otherwise it would have stalled for sure labor and made it all longer. Like,
the only way out is through.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. So basically what came true was I had an evening and night birth, and I was at home, and it was 7.5 hours. So it was like right in there of what I was looking for. Ben came out being 7 pounds on the dot, which
my gosh. I get that all the time. Like, I think it's amazing. Like, I want a 7 pound baby, 7 pounds on the dot. Or one woman said, I just posted about this in my stories. I don't know if you saw it. Someone was like, I want my baby like less than 8 pounds, and they were like 7 pounds, 15 ounces.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Like,
Like
there's so
right
many of
there.
those stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, God has a sense of
Yeah.
humor.
That's so funny. And as you guys know, I had no tearing, and he came early because he came on February 27th. So 5 days early. So
Wow.
it was like, so now next time I know to add into my manifestation, no Pitocin, because I didn't say that.
Right. No bleeding, no
Yeah.
Pitocin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So
Wow.
that's my story. And I love how we just like naturally talked through all the moments, and you had so many amazing like teaching points and that you shared. Like, and guys, if you think you learned a lot from Karen now, oh my God, you don't even not understand like her course. She just goes in deeper into everything. I also have her postpartum course, which taught me how to have Ben latch on for breastfeeding. And that helped me so much because I was able to like know how to get him to latch right away easier. I knew when the latch wasn't correct to delatch him so that my nipples wouldn't go through so much pain, right? So I was able to heal my nipples
Yeah.
faster the first week. So that also helped so much. So yeah, oh my gosh, I cannot recommend your courses enough. Like, and the funny thing is that I put out there like into the universe when I was pregnant, I'm like, I want to learn something about how to give birth naturally. And I was kind of thinking about, do I learn about hypnobirthing and all of that? And I wasn't actively looking out for a solution yet because I was still like maybe, I don't know, 5 months, 6 months pregnant or something. And then one of my podcast listeners sent me your account, and she's like, she's incredible. Check her out. I opened up like your account. I went to your website, saw your course, read what it was about, and I'm like, this is literally what I need. And I just like bought it on the spot and dove into it. So the universe literally delivered you to me in this incredible way. And so I hope that a lot of you that are listening that also want to, learn how to, have a very empowering experience with you, giving birth intuitively and choosing your birth plan and being educated about it, about what your body can actually do naturally, about all the different things. Like, I highly, highly recommend, connecting with Karen and her course. It's just, this experience could not have been what it was without all of your help. So I'm just so grateful for what you do for the world. And I cannot wait I just want your message there's so many people that still need to hear about it. I just want it to like blast throughout the whole entire world because like our medical system is like behind on understanding that it needs to be a holistic experience. And like, I cannot wait till, they can implement new things into the hospital system, because of course there's nothing wrong with giving birth at a hospital, but let's make that experience better for those women, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah, I have a whole module on pain-free birth in a hospital and the things you might want to advocate for, the things to look out for, and how to handle all those interruptions, and what you do have control over, what your rights are in a hospital, how to fire your doctor, how to fire your nurse if you have to, or if you want to, and they're not serving your well-being. How to write a birth plan. There's like a bunch on that. I love your feedback on the postpartum, and that's a newer course I just created, and I'm so happy that helped you in that moment, because a lot of times when you're postpartum and you're in the throes of like postpartum hormones and breastfeeding and sleep depression, you don't know who to reach out to or where to get information when you need it. So I tried to compile like a perfect, like just a course that could help you in the midst of all that, to like bond with baby, things to do to avoid postpartum depression, how to latch, just like basic stuff that I didn't know, like when I had my first, that I'm like, I wish somebody taught me this. It would have been so valuable if I found out like week 1 rather than like 3 months in or 6 months in.
Yeah.
So
it made the transition so much easier, and the transition was hard. Like the first 2 weeks were so hard for me, like the first 2.5 weeks. I spoke about it honestly on like Instagram, how it's like this, you go from like one lifestyle to another overnight, and you have a crying baby, you don't know why they're crying, you don't know how to like comfort them. And then my identity, I was like, will I ever be able to like be that like entrepreneur and have time for myself and work out and all of that? It's like, I'm literally just like breastfeeding, sleeping, eating, breastfeeding, sleeping, eating. And it got me like I had some very like darker moments emotionally, right? But also there were beautiful highs along with it, right? It's just the first 2.5 weeks were very intense. And for me to have that knowledge beforehand from your course helped make it easier, because I couldn't even imagine not having that knowledge and going through everything that I went through. So yeah, it was just so helpful. Um, and now I'm a month in. So it's a month in, and we're starting to feel like we're getting the hang of things. And of course, every week and every month is going to be new, challenges, new things to navigate and stuff. But I could definitely see a clear difference between the first 2.5 weeks to now. It's like, okay, I can see how I can make time for myself, and I can see how to be there for him and what he needs to feel comforted, and how we can be as like work as a team, as a family together, and not feel overwhelmed. So I'm feeling really good that it's a month in, and this is the perfect time to like record this podcast, because I have the energy to actually do this as well.
You're actually pretty good. It usually takes me about 2 months to feel like, okay, I'm ready to do anything other than so good for you.
Well, I do it in like 1 to 2 hour spurts every second day at work, because it's like it helps me so much. It's like my mental, like otherwise I feel like my brain is going to turn into mush, and it just helps me keep that part of my identity. So yeah. And so I wanted to know also, before we end this amazing podcast episode, is there anything else that's on your heart, on your mind, that you want to make sure to mention to women about giving birth, about anything?
Sorry for my coughing. And
oh, that's okay.
I just got over.
It's okay, let it out, because sometimes it's like so bad when it just sits there.
Yeah, it's like right here.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Great for sound quality. Well, thank you for asking. What else should women know? I would just say like that your body's designed to do this. Like, it's designed to give birth. The physiology works. Your body works. Don't believe the lies that it's broken. Even if you've been told, oh, you can't have kids, your hips are too small. Like, a lot of these things that women will label, or doctors label women as, they don't really know, because your body is fluid. Your body is ever changing. Your hormones are ever changing. What you experienced as a teenager at 16 with whatever kind of period symptoms or whatever diagnoses you got may not be true in your 20s or 30s. So like, get to know your body. Believe that like your body was divinely created with intelligence and wisdom and ancient wisdom that you're carrying on from like generations of women before you, and it knows how to birth. Even if you have medical things going on, or fears or doubts, or you've heard horror stories of birth from friends and family, or you've seen it growing up like in the movies, like we all have, we've been indoctrinated with this culture of fear around birth, and we have to go through a process of like detoxing the fear when we get pregnant, or when we want to get pregnant. And that process can be so healing and so life-giving when we choose to let go of what doesn't serve us, the birth stories that don't serve us, the fears that don't serve us, even the labels and diagnoses that may have been put on us 10 years ago. We can choose to like believe and trust in our body's innate wisdom. And so I would encourage any of your listeners who feel like they may be carrying some of that baggage, and maybe you were challenged by Sarah's story and some of the things you heard today, to explore it more and to kind of question. I'm a big questioner. Like, okay, if I don't understand something, I'm going to find out like more about it. Begin to question some of the things you may have held to be true about childbirth and motherhood from, all your years, and ask yourself, is this really serving me? Does this feel like truth to my body? I'm a big component of like body integration. Ask your body, like, what is it feeling? What is it thinking? We do a lot of that in the course. There's a lot of activations that get you in touch with your body, even like talking and speaking over your body and declaring things over your body that you, even inner vows that you may have taken on, or belief systems you've taken on about your body and birth and connecting to your baby. Like, I just love the interconnectedness of all of it. So begin to question things, begin to explore what the truth is of your body and how it's designed for birth. And if you want to learn more about pain-free birth and take that childbirth education course, you can find out more on my website, painfreebirth.com, or Instagram. You can follow me at painfreebirth. And we've also got the postpartum course up there, which just came out a couple months ago. And I'm so excited to hear feedback about that. So that's also available. I have a whole module on there about dealing with birth trauma. If you're someone who had a medicalized birth in a hospital system where you had your power taken away, and doctors who didn't understand the physiology, didn't take care of your heart or your emotions in labor, or complications happened regardless of why, there's a whole module in there about healing from birth trauma and reintegrating with your body, which is so important, especially in this season of motherhood and postpartum, where there's healing that's taking place, not just on a physical level of healing from the birth, but healing emotionally, mentally, spiritually, as we are holistic beings. So I just bless your listeners and anyone on that journey, wherever you are on that journey. And I hope to I just thank you, Sarah, for having me on and speaking to your group, your listeners of my passion of birth. And I hope that they caught something of value.
Oh, for sure. Oh my gosh. Yeah, for sure they have. And yeah, this has been so much fun. Yeah, I love how I was able to share my story, which I was so excited with you and everybody. And I love that you love to nerd out on these stories too. And then we were able to like take small pauses and like learn throughout. Oh, it was so good. So yeah, thank you for
How do
your
you
time.
can I ask you, how do you feel now that you're a month out? Has your perspective shifted, or where are you at? I know you said you feel like you're at a good point. Like, okay, I'm getting my life back a little bit.
How do I feel in general with like motherhood or with the birth?
Motherhood or your birth? Yeah. Or like, I mean, you're still pretty early, like a month is still like, you're really in the thick of it still.
Yeah, I am. So yeah, I love to be super open and real. There are moments where I feel trapped, where I feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I got myself into with like, it's so funny. I literally thought that it would be more of like a hourly like time commitment, more of a side hustle to be like, oh, I can like do everything I used to do before, maybe a little less, totally, of course, but then take care of my kid and be a family together and all of that. But like it's just like, oh my God, like full-time, extra full-time right now. And so that was like a shock to the system. And then in the moments where I just want to like do what I want to do, like work out, and it's like I can't work out yet because my body is healing. It feels like the past year of like pregnancy plus this, it's like I feel like a little bit far away from the identity that I had before I got pregnant, where I was like always consistently working out, being able to do what I wanted when I wanted, like so much freedom, right? And so I have moments of feeling trapped when Ben needs me, or if for example, like, I mean, Rory's been incredible. We're navigating this together. We're doing so much together, but there's times where, of course, like you want to make sure he takes care of his body, his mental health, all that. He goes to yoga. And then if I'm alone and Ben starts crying and I have to figure it out, it's like, I just want to like relax right now. And I have to deal with this. It's like kind of like the part of giving birth. It's like, there's no out. Right. And this is going to be a big learning, like growth experience for me, because I've heard of like how, as much as you help your children grow and evolve and learn, they're also doing the same for you. So in those hard moments, I have to like take a pause, take a breath, and like presence myself, look at him and be like, oh my gosh, okay, but I'm here for you. And like, thank you for everything you're teaching me right now. And I'm going through a growth spurt too. And yes, you're going through a growth spurt because you're crying for more milk, but I'm going through a growth spurt too. And then there are those like magical moments where everything just seems to like, it's an easier day maybe, where he like is more calm and he feels good, and then we feel like we're managing well, and we have those like bonding, connecting moments, and life just like slows down and he holds my hand, right? And so it's pretty much a roller coaster with like moments of, am I even meant to be a mom? So it's like back and forth, right? And I think talking with Rory, like he's like, Sarah, I think maybe this might be the harder moment for you with like a newborn, because they're just like, they just need you. They don't give you any feedback back. Like he's not smiling yet or anything. And you're the type of person who loves to like be out and doing things. And like maybe when he's a little bit older, or like 2, 3, like you can go start playing sports, being active, like teaching him dancing, like all that kind of stuff. So he's like, I think you're just transitioning and you're going to be fine. Don't worry. And I'm like, yes, I think so too. Because already if he's like sleeping if he's sleeping and I see him like smile because he smiles in his sleep, I'm like, oh, but that's really cute. And it's like, that's just going to be more and more. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I have moments of like panic and then I'm like, okay, but this is good, so that's
Yeah.
where I'm at.
That's awesome. Thank you for being so real and honest, and that's all so normal, and and you're doing an amazing job. I don't know if anyone's told you that lately, but you really are. It's a massive transition. That first one is like for me the hardest transition because it's so new. You don't know what to expect. Um, and yeah, like and being present in that moment, like just saying to yourself, like this is the only moment that matters right now
Mhm.
is something helped me. And even just like knowing like be like so you're doing an amazing job that like you really do go through this identity shift of like who am I now, like
Mhm.
what does this mean, like you're letting your it's like you're purging that transition from maiden to mother and
Yeah.
you're becoming this new person and that maiden has to die and that death is a process at times and you have to grieve it and you grieve like the perception you had of your old identity in order to like step into the role of mother. And what does that role mean and what does that encompass, and does that mean you lose everything that made you who you were before? Well, no, but it does transform.
Yeah.
And you do die to certain things, but then you become this stronger, more vibrant, more live version of yourself that also steps up into this greater role of greater responsibility as a mother. And then like have and then also like being present and going, okay, I have all these ideas, all these things I want to do, all these like identities, like my goals, my dreams. And I think so many women buy into this, like, oh, I have to give that up to be a mom, or they fear giving it up. And it's not that you have to give it up, but there is like a pause. There is like a
Yeah.
period of time where like postpartum demands that you put everything aside, like all of that ambition and dream and amazing good stuff. Not that it's gone forever, but it
Yeah.
does require everything of you
Yes.
in those postpartum months.
And
And
yeah.
like babies live, this is what I found so interesting, like babies live in delta. They're not in beta. The brain doesn't know how to be in beta, like it's developing those connections. So like they live in theta and delta, and in order for us to connect and bond with them, we have to go into those deeper states
Mm.
of consciousness.
Ooh, I like that. That's
So
so
like if we're
true.
always in beta thinking, okay, what's wrong, what do you need, you're crying, this that, oh, you're smiling, okay, oh, you're
Yeah.
pooping, oh, maybe you're hungry, like if we're only there, it's going to be harder to bond because they're in delta. But if you're used to going to those states and you experienced going to those states in labor, it's easier. You have the pathways already there. You can go back. It just takes
Yeah.
intentionality to go, okay, my baby needs me right now. What is postpartum demanding of me right now? And it might demand more of your time. It absolutely demands more of your time and energy and sleep and pretty much everything about you, your
Yeah.
body, everything. It demands it all. And if you're willing to give it and be present, then it's just a matter of connecting and going down the path and saying, okay, I'm
It's so
gonna
true.
be in this moment with my baby.
Oh my gosh, I love how you said that. And actually, I remember in the course you mentioned how important it is when you're breastfeeding or just feeding in general, however, bottle or breastfeeding, to do skin to skin to promote oxytocin, which helps, with postpartum depression and also helps produce the amount of milk that they need. Um, but also you mentioned like when you're breastfeeding, like pause, look at your baby, look into their eyes, like feel their skin, hold their hand, like be present. And oh, that has been so helpful because, of course, I could easily go into like trying to be productive or distracted with a show, right? So what I've figured out for myself that works well to balance out myself is like 1/3 of the time that I'm feeding, I'm I'm learning something new. I have purchased a new course and I'm learning and developing my brain for my business, all of that. 1/3 of the time I'm being present, no distractions. I'm just with him and like connected to him. And then 1/3 of the time I'm like, okay, I'll watch a show. So it's just like, and I go through it not 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. It's like what intuitively I see how I feel in the moment. Right. But that I found that slowing down and like connecting with him has, yeah, is deepening the bond and all of that. And just to be like super transparent, when I birth Ben, I didn't have that moment of like, it was blissful, it was a high, it was everything, but it wasn't like a moment where I cried and I was like, I love this thing more than anything in the world. I didn't have that moment. And actually for the first, I feel like 2 to 2.5 weeks, when I was going through that much harder beginning of the transition, I felt zero bond, zero connection. And I didn't have that like love, and I couldn't even talk to him. Like Rory was amazing. He would be like, okay, Ben, let's take you on a tour of the house. This is a photo where I proposed to your mom. He was like doing that and talking to him like a human. And I was like resisting it. I was kind of like, I don't even want to talk to him right now, because I'm like terrified of like the future and everything it has to hold, because this is so hard already. And then I had this like, I don't know, something, I don't even know what happened, but at the 2.5 week mark onwards, I slowly started to be like, okay, hi, Ben, and start talking to him. And then I start seeing, like, thinking of reasons why, like, he's special and like all these different things. So it's actually interesting. I didn't fall in love with my baby until like, and I'm still falling in love with him. It's like a weird transition. I actually felt guilty about it, but then I'm like, no, if this is how I'm actually feeling, there's no reason to feel guilty about it. You're not a bad person. You're just navigating this the best way you can. Doesn't mean that you don't care about Ben and you're like, it was just very, very interesting and a little bit of a hard time. And then my friend Agnes, she shared this poem that helped her with her journey postpartum, whenever things got tough or hard. And I read it, and this one line stuck out and changed. I think maybe that was the shifting point for me. I think the line said, with your days that are filled with nothing, you are my everything. And it was the baby speaking to the mom in the poem. And I'm like, oh my God, like that hit me hard, because I kept feeling like, oh, I'm just breastfeeding. All I'm doing is this. And I don't have enough time for me. But then I realized like I'm his everything. And it's like that gave me such a sense of like purpose and like connection to him, that I'm like, yes, I'm here for you. And that's what sparked that like love and bond. So I also want to share that, because for those of you that maybe felt the same way right off the bat, where you didn't feel that like huge hit of love, because so many people are like, you'll meet your baby and it's like the biggest love of your life, and I didn't have that moment, and it's okay if you didn't have that moment, because
I think a lot of women can probably relate to that. Or even if you had it, then you're still having to show up and be present in those moments, or you're building that as you go. Like, I think that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And now I'm getting obsessed with him. Like literally, I'm just like, I'm now at that point where I'm like, okay, I want to hang out with you. I want to comfort you. It's like fun for me. It's becoming fun. It's becoming special. And like, so yeah, so interesting. Just getting to know your baby.
Oh, congratulations. Thank you for sharing your story. I love it.
Thank you. And thanks for being here with me while I did it. It was, it made it that much more special. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
And for everybody listening, make sure to follow Karen on Instagram at Pain-Free Birth. She is a wealth of knowledge there as well. And then her courses, you can find them at painfreebirth.com. And then the links will also be in the show notes. So thank you so much. And thanks, Karen.
Thanks for having me on. Bye.
Yay! Thank you so much for hanging out with me and tuning into this episode. If you got value out of it, please feel free to message me on Instagram at Sarah Monica Photo. That's Sarah no H, Monica with a K photo, to let me know. I get so freaking energized hearing from others that what I've said has had a positive impact on their lives. Also, make sure to hit subscribe to the Shine and Thrive podcast to never miss an episode. I'm so grateful for you, and I'm sending you all the productive vibes your way so you have the best week ever.